Hey, Dr. Scott.
Sonicare. Hey,
Sponsored by
Shiloh.
Sonicare today.
Yeah.
Welcome to Behind the Couch, everyone. For anyone new listening, perhaps, this is listening or watching. This is our twice monthly live stream on Get Vocal that is the companion to LA Not So Confidential, our regular podcast that we also do twice a month. And it's so we can follow up and have more conversations with you guys about things that are going on in the world, follow up to whatever random topic we decided to pick. And actually today we're going to do those two things. Plus we have a guest with us today. So we are going to get through some stuff at the top here. As you guys can see, I'm back in my house. Last time I had no power. I'm back home and I have upped my prepper level because we got a generator after that whole power outage thing. And then today we had the electrical redone. So all we got to do is like plug it in and it powers the whole house. So I found myself in a TikTok prepper rabbit hole last week after that all happened. Why can't there be like just a normal person giving tips about like preparedness or emergency preparedness instead of complete crazy people doing it? Like
There's got to be some that are, right? I mean, there's got to be a couple that are out there. Yeah.
I'm trying to find them. Like, I think I will find one. Yeah, Shannon, like I have any spare time. I would, but as if I have the time to do that. But like, I'll find one. I'm like, oh, okay, this mom is like, she's got some good tips. Okay, I'll watch this video. And then it's like, oh, let me show you my prepper bunker. And it's like, it's good. It's organized. It's gorgeous. It's like, I wish I could have that. But then does there have to be an American flag tucked in every single pocket of every backpack of every corner of like, it's just, I don't know. I guess you have to have your flags for when you stake your claim when the new world is happening or whatever.
I guess it always just goes off the rails somewhere. It's like,
it does.
Here's a little just quick tip. Remember, protein bar, like most packaged foods, will last several years beyond their date, and that's going to really help you when you're in the tunnels under Los Angeles with the reptilian overlords and they're only giving you rats.
100%.
They won't give you a full rounded meal, so you got to have your vitamin C. Make sure
you have laminated your rice and beans. I know, totally. It's exactly what it is. Very entertaining, I have to say. But yeah, Adrian says he's going to have to teach us Morse code.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Adrian's going to be part of our tribe in the apocalypse, by the way. I invited him and his husband. They have lots of skills to help us out.
Great. All we have is a spice rack to bring. That's all that Dan and I have.
I mean, Dan
is all that we have. He's a great cook.
Very
That's
gifted
all we
cook,
have to contribute.
So he's in, he gets a spot. Anyway, we got one new patron today. I was going to say we don't have anybody.
How cool.
I know. Do you want to take the part that's in blue for you?
Oh, that? You mean the Google Drive that you so carefully prepared that I've got like I've got like so many windows open right now. Hold on. Where are we?
I was telling Scott, I was like,
on the complete wrong window. Keep talking.
I was like, no more, or we didn't have any new patrons sign up since last time. And then one came through like an hour ago. So we need to thank these people for sure.
Yes. Okay. So our new Patreon member today is Libby B. Thank you so much. Blows me away every time when that email comes through and it's like, wait, somebody's giving us money? How nice.
Thank you, Libby.
That allows us to keep our wonderful co-producer paid and supporting his family, and gives you way better sound quality, the listener and the participator. So
yeah, but we need more because he keeps having babies, and so we just need to keep like helping.
He's
support.
Really fertile. He's got a lot of his boys swim. They swim.
And it's for Scott's skincare and teeth routine. So thank you guys.
Oral hygiene, very important to me.
Right.
Also, you guys, we are excited about the upcoming CrimeCon in Vegas this year. It's going to be super exciting. We've got a group of us getting together that I'm realizing, half of them I've never met in person. So this is going to be great. And if you're going to meet us in Vegas, then the CrimeCon code for 10% off each badge is confidential. So please show up. Come look, we got some swag, get some pictures made, hang out with us. We're going to be working our table at Podcast Row.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, it's so close to California. We should have a ton of people from Southern California that are able to go. And
no excuses.
Zero. We're giving you a discount code and everything. Our overlords, Tim and Lance, will be there from Crawl Space Media. So hopefully some other Crawl Space shows will be there as well. We know Rebecca from Dialogue will for sure. Jason, Brainiac behind Santa Maybe will be there. I hope you guys are all continuing to listen to Santa Maybe a Criminal. Good stuff. I think that's about it. John, if you're around, you can click one of those grab a button spots. Please,
here he is.
Sir.
Ooh.
Hey, how are
awesome.
you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you guys?
Great. I'm so glad your camera popped on right away. We usually have like incredible technical difficulties. So thank you for being proficient.
He's an old pro at this.
Okay. Yes, I've been on camber for a while. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, how many interviews are you doing virtually a week these days?
Well, it looks like I'm on. I usually have a TV hit about 6 times a month now. That's kind of where I am. Right.
Nice.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. I want to let our audience know that Dr. John Delatorre, he's a fellow forensic psychologist and works in many of the areas that Scott and I combined have worked in. So a very busy man with a ton of experience.
Right.
You're licensed in Arizona, Texas, and New York?
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
Overachiever.
That's his way of prepping. He's going to make sure that he can like get his bug out
wherever
and go from state to state.
I can go wherever.
Yeah, the prep talk goes very well with what we're going to talk about today.
Actually, it is. I got something that I want to talk about, and
awesome.
you had an interesting sort of intro for it. So
awesome.
For sure. But yeah,
I love it when it lines up like that. You may have seen John's commentary on Court TV and the Law and Crime Trial Network, speaking on a wide variety of forensic psych topics that come up with ongoing trials. So, John, please give us a little bit of more introduction about your background and your work.
Yeah, so I got my doctorate in 2017 at a school in Glendale, Arizona. My pre-doctoral internship was at a psychiatric emergency department. So that's kind of where I got the deep dive introduction to psychosis, delusions, thoughts to harm himself or others, like actual risk assessments, including psychopharmacology. So, I mean, it was one of the best experiences. I learned absolutely the most about the fringes of psychology during that pre-doctoral internship. And then I did a postdoc in forensics. And so there you get the standard stuff. I primarily work in criminal psychology, but I have background in civil, so like personal injury, family court stuff. I'm a member of ATAP, right? You guys talked about it in your special. And I did a presentation for them on the stalking of mental health practitioners and police officers.
Ooh.
So
great topic.
Being a member of ATAP has really gone a long way in sort of getting me to do more threat assessment work. I do some school and workplace threat assessments. My dissertation was on creating a new pathology model for mass shooters. So I am down deep.
Perfect.
And you have me on as a disaster psychologist too. You had labeled me as that, and that's kind of
Please tell me more about that. Like I'm on down to like movie genres. Disasters are my favorite. And you heard a little bit about, my prepper tendencies, but please tell me about that.
Yeah, so that's kind of like where I like to. That's where like the fun stuff, the stuff that I get to be the most creative, and the stuff that I really enjoy doing is in disaster work. I haven't been able to do it as much, but if something happens like a hurricane, earthquake, wildfires, I've responded to. But I've also responded to acts of violence, domestic terrorism,
Mm.
and stuff like that. So that's kind of where sort of the impetus for all of this other forensic work has come from, doing, being the practitioner on scene when something has happened. I've been on death notifications. I wasn't the one making the notification, but I was the one that came in right after the police had left. So to be there with the family. So I've had a wide variety of experiences when it comes to interacting with the more intense parts of what our job can be.
Yeah, I mean, the disaster stuff is one of those things that you kind of hear of in school, when they tell you like, okay, you could only maybe practice across state lines in an emergency. And
Yeah.
they kind of use those big things as examples of like, well, what could that really be? And I think for a lot of us, COVID was the first exposure we'd had to being able to do some of those things that are normally not done because of, the disasters and people having to sort of, I know I had a client that had to travel across state lines and some of the restrictions were lifted. And, but to hear about, like a Hurricane Katrina or something like that, having mental health professionals sort of flock to the people that are needed, that's, I don't think a lot of people get that experience. That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's not something that we talk about or kind of train on, but it's 100% for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, to kind of set us off on the right foot, and for anyone that hasn't listened to our episode yet, Scott, maybe you want to just kind of recap what we talked about, and then we'll let John kind of get into some of the things that we asked him to come speak about today. I see in the chat, Shannon's already like, okay, and what's your podcast called, Dr. Delatorre? Like, I need to hear more about this.
I don't have a podcast. I don't. I keep thinking about getting one, but I don't know. For some reason, I can't seem to think of any direction to take one.
Yeah, well, we'll be sure to let everyone know where they can find you on social media and everything, so they can follow the things that you are
doing.
Yeah.
So in our most recent episode, we covered domestic violent extremism and mass casualty events. Just a real quick overview going back to some of the typologies that of the perpetrators of these events: racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, animal rights or environmental violent extremists, anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists. And then there's a specific but small sort of carve-out group of abortion-related violent extremists with really, really intense ideological agendas in support of pro-life or pro-choice beliefs. And then we have sort of a catch-all category that, I guess previously it would have been a catch-all. Now it really is kind of rising very rapidly, given the last 15 to 20 years of people being able to live more solidly in a bubble, or what we would call an echo chamber of radical ideologies. And to give an example, I would say Proud Boys. We're finding out more about the Proud Boy movement that was sort of like jocular and not taken very seriously. It was like, machismo and men's rights. And now we're finding out that there has been, especially related to January 6th last year, some very serious incidents. The Boogaloo movement, those both fall in what we would call the extreme ends of the men's rights movements, or the manosphere, which is a fascinating and somewhat terrifying and hilarious group of belief systems at times. Yeah. Then we also have religiosity of any belief system. So really high religiosity, especially when it comes in contact with rigidity about sexual role norms, especially masculine ideologies and male role norms. And that leads to horrific incidents like the yoga studio shooting that we have reported on in our previous episodes. And then also Dr. Shiloh had touched on in our episode about very rare, thankfully, but seems more prevalent, because when we see some of these violent acts, there is a mental health component to it. And it may be, even if it comes down to a predisposition of being an individual who perpetrates domestic violence within their intimate relationship. Looping that back to something I said earlier in our first points, we talked about this, that we're finding more and more evidence as more data emerges, more data points from these events, that we are seeing that there is a real overlap in that Venn diagram of individuals who perpetrate domestic violence being more willing to take it to a larger level in many excuse me, in many instances. So, John, can you help us understand more about differentiating all these concepts, or give us whatever you got? Because we are so glad to have you here to touch on these subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Shiloh and I kind of were talking about having me on because she saw that I give a presentation on extreme overvalued beliefs versus delusions. And, you know, there's the 2020 and the pandemic has really sort of set us on a course where a lot of these things that I think would have taken a lot longer to manifest itself in the real world has really just exploded. Now, obviously, there was some administrative, right there. We had some leadership issues that also contributed to this explosion. But we had already been seeing all of this stuff happening on the internet. It just wasn't as overt as it has been becoming, and so unfortunately, we're going to start seeing these things in the forensic world first, and then we're going to start seeing these things kind of bleed into the clinical world. And yes, I give the extreme overvalued beliefs presentation to a primarily forensic population, but I always enjoy having some clinical people in there because we really need to talk about what the difference is between someone that has a delusion and someone who has an overvalued belief and someone who has an extreme overvalued belief. Because in my mind, it's all part of a spectrum, right? It's all part of a belief system that someone has and can, in some ways, move forward and backward on that spectrum, where you can have a delusional disorder. We'll just start with the delusion, right? It's just what we call a fixed and false belief, right? That's just the simple shorthand. That's not really the best definition for it, but it's a simple shorthand for us to use and for the audience to have. It's a belief that despite all of the evidence that suggests that you are incorrect, you still hold on to. That there mounds of evidence can come and it doesn't matter. You're never going to change your mind about it. Now, it's not a problem. As a psychologist, to me, it's not, I mean, it is important, but it's not as important. The thoughts that you have in your mind, what you do for those thoughts, that's what's important to me. But the thoughts that you have in your mind, we'll leave that to the Freudians that are out there. That's not really what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, when it starts impacting other people, that's when problematic behavior. That's when we get concerned.
And otherwise, you're never going to know. You're never going to know who has a delusion at all, unless you prime them to have that conversation where that delusion then comes out.
Right.
Because otherwise, they're going to live their day to day. They're going to go to work. They're going to have a family. Like, they're going to have all of these things where it doesn't matter. But the moment that you say that one person's name, all of a sudden, it's just going to go off. Or the moment that you talk about, the earth being round, then it's going to go off. Right. And so then we have to start thinking about what an overvalued belief is. And this is where I like having the clinical people, because the clinical people really do this a lot. The individuals who have obsessive compulsive disorder, the individuals who have body dysmorphia, the individuals who have anorexia, bulimia, the individuals who have a belief system in which they engage in some kind of behavior in order to reduce the anxiety of having that belief. So checking the lock on the door multiple times, or individuals who, when they look in the mirror, they think themselves to be heavier than what they actually are. These are overvalued beliefs. It's still a belief system. It's still something that you believe in, but now you've taken it a step further, where now you're engaging in some kind of behavior that's associated with that belief. Now, generally speaking, I mean, obviously, any individual who's engaging in binging and purging behaviors is it's self-harm. You know, if you just want to label it real quick, it is self-harm. But at the end of the day, individuals with, you know, obsessive compulsive disorder, they're not intending to engage in a harmful act. It's merely an anxiety reducing behavior. Eventually it can become one, such as the hand washing and stuff like that. Eventually it becomes a harmful behavior, but it didn't intend to be that.
And a lot of
It-
times they wish they weren't doing it, you know,
right,
they wish they
right.
could stop and break that cycle.
Right. And then we have the extreme overvalued beliefs, right? Now, this is how we're going to make the distinction between what someone with a delusional disorder or delusion and someone who has an extreme overvalued belief. This is the distinction that I make when I give this presentation. The individual with an extreme overvalued belief is willing to engage in a violent act in furtherance of that belief. An individual with a delusional disorder may or may not. And I know, Dr. Charlotte, I know you wanted to talk about the Waffle House
Yeah.
trial that had just happened.
Right.
Generally speaking, though, unless we're talking about the erotomania, right, or the persecutory type delusions, generally speaking, and someone with a delusion isn't going to engage in some kind of violent act. Now, the persecutory and the erotomanic type subtypes of the delusional disorder, they can, and that's kind of where stalking comes in, and you know, some other kinds of things. They can, and they're more likely to. Uh, but when we're choosing to say who is the most likely, is it someone with persecutory or erotomanic delusions? When someone has an extreme overvalued belief, though, those people, that's what their whole, the only way to further their belief system is to engage in the violent act that is associated with that extreme overvalued belief. Now, where do these beliefs come from? I mean, they can come from anywhere. And right now, they're coming primarily from the internet.
Right.
We can talk about conspiracy theories for hours upon end, but it's not just a conspiracy theory. It's so rooted in some aspect of the truth that the person feels compelled to have to engage in some kind of act in order to create the just world that they want, that the belief suggests that they can have.
Can I jump in with a question, John? Just maybe for a bullet point for you to discuss later. This is another one. Besides the recent Waffle House, the thing that just popped up is the growing number of followers of a QAnon splinter cult in Dallas that believes Kennedy and Kennedy Jr. are going to be resurrected or brought back. And now the leader is saying that we may have to leave our physical bodies in order for all of this to take place.
Red
So
flag
it sounds
language
like
there.
it sounds like that's exactly what you were taking us on a journey of that spectrum. And it sounds like that's exactly what's happening there.
Yeah, I have a section in the training that I give that discusses cults, right, and cult type behavior. Because what we're really looking at is who can influence a group of individuals to believe in these kinds of things.
Right.
There has to be someone at the head of it, someone with an overvalued belief or someone with just a delusion. It's internal, right? It comes from within. As someone with an extreme overvalued belief has an external source, an influencer of some kind is there that propels them forward into the mission. And essentially, this is what we're going to call as radicalization. And you guys brought up Reed Malloy in the podcast, and Stephen Hart is another one out of Canada. These guys are at the forefront of what we're talking about right now, which is radicalization. Are cults sort of radicalized? They are. I think they're just radicalized in a different way than perhaps we've been thinking about since 9/11, right? We usually think of radicalization as someone willing to engage in some kind of political ideology to engage in an act of terrorism. That's one way of looking at it. An alternative view of looking at it is that the person is changed internally, that they're willing to engage in some kind of harmful act that they otherwise would not have done had that person not been, had that influencer not been there. So I think cults are a unique branch of this idea of an extreme overvalued belief, because not everybody has the belief. They're just influenced by the persuasiveness of that individual. While someone like the Proud Boys and Boogaloo Boys, right, where individuals like that, they all share the belief. Now there's splinter groups even contained within those, but they all share a common belief about some aspect of society that is changing for the worse, and they want to bring back an old thing.
Yeah, I think, gosh, there's so much that we can categorize differently. Like you refer to stalking behavior, sort of that personal connection and how those overvalued beliefs can end up leading to extreme beliefs that end up leading to violence. And I think that's something a lot of us can wrap our head around because we know how pervasive intimate partner violence is. And then even, some of the other group mentality, like that we're talking about, and the beliefs, and it's kind of fueling each other and all of that. And I think we probably touched on this in the episode, but the scary part, and law enforcement saying the harder to track part, is that guy that's sitting at home getting radicalized or getting his extreme beliefs fueled in isolation from the internet, sitting there, soaking this all up, not really talking to anyone else about it. And then you end up with, a lot of these scenarios where we do see these mass casualty events. And I think that's what really ends up being terrifying for people, because it's like, how do you even start to investigate that? How do we even do a threat assessment, if we're not getting any red flags waved in our direction?
Yeah, there was a recent article, and I'm going to blank on who the authors are, but it came out like a week ago on a new structured professional judgment looking at anonymous online statements and how to sort of triage anonymous online statements. Unfortunately, we've got some Fourth Amendment issues and Fifth Amendment issues that are at play that we're clearly not going to get past. And even if there was a case that came before the Supreme Court that would allow the police to investigate further, I mean, no court would allow that kind of intrusion into essentially someone's personal effects, right? What the Fourth Amendment says, that you're free from those personal effects of yours from being searched or seized. No court is going to allow what is happening online to be just penetrated by the legal system. There's no easy answer for that, and I do think that there needs to be more connectivity between who we are individually and who we are online. Yeah. That we should be in groups, but we should make sure that the groups that we're a part of are in line with sort of fact checking us.
Reality.
Right? Yeah, reality checking us, that, that we're having an alternative view, and that alternative view is not being trolled and it's not being bullied or anything like that. If you're only listening, right, as Dr. Scott said, if you're only listening to the same bad thing, then it's just an echo chamber and a negative feedback loop.
Can you give us an idea, circling back to one of the things you said, like from your standpoint, with all of your experience, all of your research, everything you do, is there a tipping point from delusion, from extremely strongly held belief into delusion? Is there a demarcation area that we can talk about, or that you can sort of explicate for us a little more?
Yeah, it's about what behaviors you're willing to do. Right. So
that's the point. Okay.
That's the point.
All right.
Because like I said, I think as psychologists, and I think even just as a society, we feel the freedom to believe however we want to believe. But what are you willing to do as a result of that? Because having the thought in and of itself isn't going to lead us to the delusional disorder. It has to influence our lives in some particular way. Either it impacts our work life or social life. That's what makes it a disorder. And it's the behaviors that are associated with it that impacts the life. So if you are willing to engage in some kind of harmful act, whatever harm that is, whether it's a social harm of graffiti or something like that, or it's some kind of physical harm to yourself or harm to someone else, if you're willing to do something like that goes against your own character, then we need to find a way of breaking through what those thought processes are. And being, having my internship at a psych emergency department, I'm gonna tell you right now, it's not easy. It can be done, but it's not easy. And I think we need to change how we view mental health overall to start with before we're actually able to make the significant change that we need to make in order to reach those individuals who have such firmly held beliefs that they're willing to engage in harm to others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point, because if, and we're going to talk about Travis ranking from the Waffle House shooting, but clearly, there's a lot of breaks in the system where people could have gotten help, whether our stigma in getting treatment and help is so bad that parents aren't even willing to kind of put their kid in treatment, or they're sort of in denial about, is this my fault, and is it a reflection of me, or what have you, like we see with a lot of school shooters and young mass shooters, that there are plenty of indications ahead of time. But that's just it, with this sort of pathway to violence, when someone feels like, I'm the one that has to go out and do this thing for the cause, like it's me, it all lies on me, that's one of those turning points. But again, that's happening inside their head, unless there's some sort of leakage.
I think Stephen Hart talks about this. There's always leakage. There's always, but are we in a position to recognize what those warning behaviors are? And I think the concern that I think I would have is that if let's say all three of us decide to just write a book, and this is the exact book, this is going to be the Bible of warning behaviors. If you read this book, you are going to know what a warning behavior is. I think the problem is that individuals who are not trained the way that the three of us are trained are going to read that book and start applying it in ways that they shouldn't be applying.
Absolutely.
It to.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's where we need to be careful, because it can lead to a further stigma. It can lead to that this grievance gathering aspect, that maybe the person is really just venting, but because the teacher read our book and started pointing that kid out and saying, oh, you're going to be the next school shooter, did we then create the next school shooter? Yep. Because they were venting, but now they're being isolated.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the bigger concerns that what I want is for parents to be there for their children, to act as parents, and to be constantly looking at their children and being there for their children and having a connection with their children. I don't need parents to be psychologists. I'm the psychologist.
Right.
Bring them to me. But if you're completely oblivious to what your child is doing, then they're going to do anything, and then it just perpetuates the problem. So there's a lot that this is not just a one thing that you and the two of us can change. This has to be not only a systems change, this has to be a complete societal change. And I don't think that that's something that can truly happen unless we have the leadership in position to do so.
Yeah, and it just needs to be attacked from so many different angles, education-wise, mental health in the schools, a proper assessment being done in those areas. You can't control what happens in someone's household, but the systems in which surround that for children and individuals, adults too, to get the help that they need early on, that would be nice.
There was an event that occurred last fall that what is his name? Charlie Kirk was a speaker at Turning Point USA, which is a very, very right-leaning youth organization. And Charlie Kirk was taking questions from the audience, and it was supposed to be a youth organization, but there's like this bearded mountain guy stands up and he says, you can watch this video online. He says, well, look, at this point, we're living under corporate and medical fascism. This is tyranny. When do we get to use the guns? And
just tell me, when do we get
tell me, when do we get to start shooting? And the audience applauded. And he said, no, I'm not joking. I'm not saying it like that. I mean, literally, where's the line? How many elections are they going to steal before we kill these people? And unfortunately, one would think that as a pundit, as a speaker, Kirk would have had some kind of reasoned response. He did not. He did not warrant that there was a line. So I think this is a perfect illustration of what you're talking about, about that thing that keeps us all on edge, is where do they shift into the behavior? It seems like this guy was asking for permission from Kirk, or he was asking permission from his peer group there to start shooting.
And you're absolutely, that's what we're talking about, that the overvalued belief is essentially comes from within, right? It's your own belief system that makes you think that you're looking heavier than you are. But the extreme overvalued beliefs usually has some influencer. And I would say this, to individuals who would say, well, Charlie Kirk is, he's this, that, and the other thing. What I would say is this: is he those things, or does he need to be those things because those are the people that are listening to him?
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Right? Put this man on a podcast. You need a podcast just for that. Absolutely.
Right. And so we have to think, and this is why I keep harping on this idea of leadership. And I harp on it because, I'm not going to name any names, but our previous president, who, perpetuated this idea of fake news, a false narrative.
Right.
I recently saw him. He was giving one of his speeches or whatever. He was at a campaign fundraiser. He was doing something, and he had said that he had gotten the booster, and everybody started booing. But everybody started booing.
Yeah. Maybe one of the one realistic, grounded things that he has done, and he was booed for it.
He was booed for it, and so that's when you start thinking about the difference between sort of what we see in America now and what is usually compared to Nazi Germany, is that the Nazis were always in control of the narrative. The narrative is not in control of the far right wing, right? It's not. It perpetuates and it grows its own branches, and it becomes its own thing because of the online system that we have. No one can control it. And so now we're left with, do our leaders truly speak truth to power? Do they truly tell us what the actual reality is? Or do they have to keep their clicks coming? Do they have to keep the money rolling in? Are they going to, if they actually have a reasoned response? Because I would challenge that maybe he did have a reasoned response, but he would have been, eviscerated had he given that in that moment.
He'd lose his audience
where he was.
And his audience is paying the bills.
And so, but he could also be a wild racist individual. He could be that too.
Venn diagram.
Right.
And so, my point is this: that if we're not living authentically, if we're not living true, if we always believe that everything that we're listening to is tinged with some kind of slant, or is always a part of some kind of propaganda machine, then we're living, our belief system, how we view the world, is going to change. It's going to necessarily force us into thinking that the world is a much more dangerous place than what it actually is. And if our world's a dangerous place, what are we willing to do in order to keep ourselves safe? And some people are willing to do a lot, as we've seen, to keep their world safe.
Fear is a very, very powerful emotion, as it should
motivator.
Be. But it can be steered in the direction of maliciousness. And if we're in such a time where there's so little critical thinking, that it's the perfect recipe for all of this.
Critical thinking. I'm just going to talk about us as a profession, as a forensic psychologist. But critical thinking is problematic, even as forensic psychologists. I read reports and I'm like, where did you even come up with that?
Hand to God.
Yeah.
Hand to God. Yes.
So if it's happening here in a profession, and I'm sure that there's issues in my reports too, but I can tell you that I know I need to work on it. I know I need to work on critical thinking. But is everybody's self-aware that no, I not this, I need to do my own research, because we know what that's code for. It's am I actually doing what I need to do to think critically about the world now?
Well, and that's the point right there, is that if you're critically thinking, you should be thinking about that. When you go on autopilot, that's the dangerous spot, right? Like you should constantly be checking yourself of, am I taking everything into account? Am I looking at all of these sides? And when you just feel like you're floating along and nope, you got it, you know what you're doing. That's a scary spot. So,
you know, there's this incredible Reddit, and at the risk of, I don't mean to insult anyone, especially anyone who has lost a friend or a family member from COVID, but there's a Reddit thread called the Herman Cain Awards, and it's people, and what they do is they're de-identifying the individuals, but taking their posts from social medias of the media profiles of these individuals who were really rabidly anti-vax. I mean, anti-vax all the way, and then making fun of people and being deriding and condescending to, you know, putting up right-wing memes and sheeple and all this stuff, and then showing each of them getting really, really sick.
Yeah.
And either refusing treatment or videos of them screaming at the doctors, I don't have COVID, I have pneumonia, and then defiantly dying, versus other threads of people by nurses and doctors talking about how sad it is when the light bulb comes on, that their belief system is, it's all planned, it's all fake. And then they have that moment where they realize, oh crap, I'm dying.
Yeah.
And then they're desperate to get the vaccine. I guess, and I take it for granted that my elementary school education taught me that vaccines are to prevent illness, right? Yeah. But that's a further illustration of how powerful that thinking can be, and it completely divests people of critical thinking, completely. Yeah. At least, I mean, we have the level of awareness to go, I don't know if what I'm thinking is fucked up, but let me go look at it for a little. Let me take a break and think about it. Think about how it's affecting me, the world around me, and how I view the world. But do you have any ideas of what the answer is for this? On the big scale,
kind of. Kind of. Well, what I'm actually going to say is, I think it needs to be smaller scale. And what I'm going to say is this. What I'm going to say is, if you think you are, there's the old quote. If you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? You need to go somewhere else. But also, if you don't have a friend that thinks opposite of you, then you got a problem, because that's the person that you can go to, that no matter what, they're going to think the exact opposite. And that's the person that you can go to and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. And then they're going to be the devil's advocate, right? If you don't have that person in your life, then you're the sheep, right? Then you're the person that's just going to fall into whatever, tornado that is going on in that moment, believing whatever it is. And what else also, that individuals who believe in sort of these conspiracy theories, they'll believe in multiple conspiracy theories. It's not just one thing, right? And so yes, maybe we tack on, we can get everybody to finally believe the world is a sphere, but that doesn't change that those individuals are also believing in QAnon. So now we got another problem, right? That isn't changing that some of them, it's not just QAnon, it's only Pizzagate, right? It's only that. So anything that QAnon says, those are just weird people. Pizzagate is for real, right? And so it's this interesting thing that if you're gonna have one, you're gonna have multiple. And if you're gonna have all of these different things, then we can't have just one plan to deal with it, other than we have to deal with this individually, right? The larger scale kinds of things are only going to be viewed as propaganda, and it's only going to be viewed as something to take away our rights or whatever it is. They're going to manipulate it such that it fits into the narrative that they already believe in. But it's harder to do when it's your best friend telling you, hey man, that's some real racist shit that you're talking about right now. Right? That's harder to get away with. But if it's the president saying, we shouldn't do this, well, it's not my president, so you get to have that sort of detachment, that arm's length from it, where if it's someone who's your next door neighbor that you have a beer with and you watch a football game with, and they're the ones telling you that you're crazy, that hits a lot harder. So I think the big picture needs to actually be a much smaller one.
I agree. So I want to talk about the Waffle House shooting, and this is, just the verdict came out yesterday, so this is very timely. So for folks that aren't familiar with it, I just want to recap it, but also give some information about this young man's background. And then if there's some time for it, because I think we're going to go over a little bit, but John, if you can stick around, I want to talk a little bit about the charges and the pleas, or not plea. Well, yes, how he did end up changing his plea, and kind of get into some of that. So yesterday we had the verdict in which Travis Raking was found guilty on all charges in what is called the Waffle House shooting. And on April 22nd, 2018, a mass shooting occurred at a Waffle House restaurant in the Antioch neighborhood of Nashville, Tennessee. And Travis Raking is 29 years old. He fatally shot 4 people, injured 2 others with an AR-15 style rifle. The other 2 people who were injured, on top of the ones who were shot, were injured by broken glass from the restaurant. And Raking was rushed by an unarmed citizen, James Shaw, hero as far as I'm concerned. He wrestled the rifle away from him, stopped the shooting spree. Raking fled, but he was captured after a 34-hour manhunt. So listen to this early and very problematic behavior in the years, not just behavior and thinking, in the years leading up to the shooting. So in May 2016, we have the police responding to a call from his parents, who they're in the parking lot of a drugstore where a paramedic had responded and said that Raking had delusions that Taylor Swift was personally stalking him and hacking his phone. And the report noted, quote, Travis is hostile towards police and does not recognize police authority. Travis also possesses several firearms. So we have that. That has a lot to me. You know, you have the delusion of the Taylor Swift thing happening. You have these flavors of like, okay, he doesn't recognize police authority. Is this a sovereign citizen thing? Lots of stuff going on here, as well as the firearms issues. And then in 2017, so he was living with his parents in an apartment above his father's business. And one of the employees of the business called police, saying that he had seen Travis come downstairs. He was carrying a rifle. He was wearing a pink dress, and he put the rifle in the trunk and used some sort of expletive as he threw it in the trunk, and left the building. So he thought, this is odd. I don't know what this kid is on his way to do. And then on another occasion around the same time, a public pool director called police to report that Travis had come to the pool in a pink woman's housecoat and then exposed himself to the lifeguards, which I thought, this is a weird spectrum of behaviors going on here and criminal behaviors happening. And then in July of 2017, we have the U.S. Secret Service arresting Travis near the White House. And he had crossed a barrier, refused to leave. And the Secret Service said that Travis had said he wanted to set up a meeting with the president. And there, the report notes that he did make a reference to being a sovereign citizen. And he was charged with unlawful entry, which was a misdemeanor, and then entered into a deferred prosecution agreement, this deferred program, where he did 32 hours of community service. And then he was basically just ordered to stay away from the White House. And in November of 2017, the court dismissed the case after he successfully completed all of those deferment program requirements. So then he moves to the Nashville area in autumn of 2017, and he was employed as a crane and construction worker from January 2018 until April 2018. And he was fired in April for claiming that people and other employees were, quote, after him. So according to the police, that only 4 days before the Waffle House shooting, he had stolen a BMW, and the police were able to track it down, and they found it at his location. They found the key fob in his apartment. So from just 2 years before the shooting, we see a big snapshot of what is going on for this guy. So I mean, John, I'd just like to get your take on kind of either, escalation or just kind of the markers that you're seeing, and how this ended up.
Well, I mean, I've got a lot to say about this. This is something that I covered for the Law and Crime Network and Court TV. I do insanity evaluations fairly regularly, so I understand the complexity of this evaluation, and I also understand that this defense strategy very rarely works in a trial setting. Juries do not like the idea that someone is crazy enough to not be responsible for their behaviors. I think this is a clear case of the insanity defense being appropriate, but I also see that because juries don't like it, I'm not surprised. I think it saddens me that this guy, who clearly has not been able to get the help that he needs for his issues, isn't going to get it. Because let's be honest with one another, prison is not treatment.
No.
And he needed treatment. Yeah, yes, he's going to be getting, medications, and perhaps he'll see mental health, once every 30 days or something like, perhaps, but he's not getting the treatment. Yeah, he's not
management at best.
Yeah, he's not getting anything that he needs. But I also understand where the jury is coming from, because they don't like someone not taking responsibility for their actions. And I'm of two minds about this, and I'm of two minds about this because of the testimony that was given. The first psychologist that they brought on, Dr. Wood, I think was outstanding. And even on cross-examination, you could tell that she was very thorough in what she was doing and had been practiced, and could present a narrative to the jury that would make sense for the jury to buy into. Essentially, that's what we're trying to do when we're experts testifying, is that we want the jury to believe that we are credible and that what our testimony is fits a narrative that they've already created based on the evidence that they've previously heard. But then the second expert came on and was not good in any way, shape, or form. Just could not answer simple cross-examination questions about what she viewed and when she viewed it and who gave it to her. I don't think the jury saw her as very credible, and because of that, they gave themselves an opportunity. The jury gave themselves an opportunity to render the decision that this guy needed to go to prison. And I think it's life.
I'm sorry. Can I just jump in with a question? Are these the psychologists that initially assessed him for the incompetency piece?
No. So there was a competency issue at play initially, but this was Dr. Wood and Dr. Isen, I think her name is, evaluated him for insanity. Now, both of them did a very curious thing. So Dr. Wood is part of the Vanderbilt psychiatric system. And so in Tennessee, they send all of these individuals to this place. And that's where the individual gets the court-ordered evaluation done. Dr. Isen worked in a different state-run hospital. And so it's unclear how she was involved in the case, because she seemed to be doing a lot more treatment and then testifying to insanity. I'm not quite sure why that was happening.
That's a conflict of interest right there. Unless
it's very, and this is what I'm talking about, is that I'm not sure that you needed the second person, this Dr. Isen, because I think she muddied the water too much. I don't think she crafted a clear enough delineation of, look, this guy's really, really sick. And we understand that it comes across, he didn't purchase the weapon. The weapons were given to him. But he had the weapons. He put water in a backpack, right? He had all of these thoughts. Essentially, he had a plan. My challenge to that is, you hear a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists talk about this, and they say, well, someone with schizophrenia is so disorganized they can't have a plan. Now, that's not true. They are disorganized in their thinking, but that doesn't mean that they can't create a plan.
Absolutely.
They can create a plan. It's the implementation of it may be disorganized. There are other issues in terms of what disorganization looks like. Putting water in a backpack and putting bullets in a gun is not necessarily a sign that someone has the mens rea or the completely organized thinking, right? It's not necessarily working that way. So I already have a problem with that. Then I have a problem with this issue. Well, he ran, right? He was on the lam for like 36 hours. Clearly that means that he has consciousness of guilt. Well, first of all, insanity evaluations don't look like that. That's not what you're looking at. You're only looking at the offense charged. And he wasn't charged with evading arrest. He wasn't charged with fleeing the scene of the crime. So if it were me doing this evaluation and someone were to ask me, well, Dr. Delatorre, isn't that consciousness of guilt? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. I didn't evaluate it for that because you decided not to charge him with that crime. So I'm not going to answer that question. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden, he's, oh my God, I did something wrong, or he had this plan about it. Dr. Wood did a very good job in her testimony saying, look, just because he ran doesn't mean that all of a sudden he knew what was right and what was wrong. He was clearly acting upon these persecutory delusions. I mean, Taylor Swift coming after you? Yeah. I mean, he's reaching out to Oprah. He sends a letter to Oprah asking for Oprah's help to get Taylor Swift off his back. I mean, this guy he's not well.
If anyone can get Taylor Swift off your back.
With his coloring, he also clearly a spring when it comes to the color wheel. He should never have tried to wear pink. Pink would not work. So clearly he's got some, he's not off. He's off at his
and he's a mouth breather too. So he's there always like that. And so it's like, it's not, there was a lot of things working against.
Do you think that was some sort of like dissociative moments, or was he, was there a substance history that we know about?
Yes, there was a substance history. I don't recall what exactly it was, but there was a substance history that was there. And even if we didn't have any real information, I would just assume so. This guy had untreated schizophrenia. Mm-hmm. He's using something, whether it's alcohol or marijuana, or he's getting some strange pills from some guy off the, in the homeless plot.
Yeah, he's self-medicating.
No one knows what's getting. Yeah, he's for sure self-medicating.
Yeah.
But I think the issue becomes when you look at him, right? Because once we're back to what is the jury thinking? When the jury looks at him, I think they're thinking two things. They're thinking, this guy looks sick, but this guy isn't emoting. Because he looks ill and he's not emoting, we've got two problems here, because attractive defendants usually get lighter sentences if they're even found guilty. Defendants that the jury can say, look, this guy's not going to be a harm to society. They're probably either going to get acquitted or they're going to get a lighter sentence. And Travis Rankin had neither one of those.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the defense witnesses, the expert witnesses, one did, but one canceled the other one out, really presented a narrative. Because what's even more confusing than that is that they didn't even give him diminished capacity. Right? They didn't even, they found him guilty of murder, which means that he had purposeful or knowing engaging in these violent acts. And I don't think me as a juror or me as a psychologist can say without a doubt that he was purposefully wanting to kill these individuals. Now, he may be purposeful in wanting to kill, but I don't know that he was purposeful in wanting to kill these individuals. And that's the difference, because that's how the law works. You have to meet all the requirements for that crime, not just what the thought process that you were having, just whatever act that you wanted to commit. You had to have the mens rea for it. And I don't think that he did. I think that at least it should have been reckless, if not negligence.
Yeah.
And I think there's a disservice here.
I just want to clarify that. So in August of 2018, a judge did find him incompetent to stand trial and then ordered him to mental health treatment. And then in October, only a few months later, they said, okay, he's competent enough to stand trial. And he did end up getting a diagnosis of schizophrenia from these experts that you're talking about.
Yeah. So it's Dr. Kirsten first. Yeah.
And I was going to say, at that point, when somebody is incarcerated, and that's probably, if you're looking at any kind of treatment or at least evaluation, that restoration of competency
Mhm.
is probably about to get to a real diagnosis, because they have not been able to access any self-medication or any street drugs.
Right.
Usually you can get clearly you can get them within a jail or a prison, but that in the mental health housing, it's more likely not to happen. So that's probably the closest they ever got to what his level of functioning is during that process to prep him to come back to.
Right.
And
But even
didn't
then,
they
even the competency stuff, even that's problematic because it's not treatment. I mean, it's just someone learning rote memorization of the legal system. That's all that it is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no treatment there.
and
To be able to
originally
parrot it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
didn't he so he pled not guilty and then they changed it to not guilty by reason of insanity was how he pled. And
Yeah.
then that was the jury's job to
The jury
essentially.
said, yeah. So, and not in every jurisdiction, but in Tennessee specifically, the
Mhm.
experts cannot give an opinion on the ultimate question. So they couldn't say, in my opinion, Travis Ranking was insane. Like they couldn't give that opinion. That's up to the trier of fact. But I still have a problem that not even diminished capacity. I mean, I get it. I get that juries don't want individuals to lose responsibility. I get that, but not even
Yeah.
diminished capacity. I mean, you found him guilty on all 16 charges, and this guy's going away life without parole. I think is what he got.
Well, it's I think it's easier for us to sit here and say, okay, here's the mission, here's the parameters. Like this is what we would do, because of, our profession, right? Like here's what we know what our job is. And if we were jurors, we would, absolutely keep our nose to the grindstone and work within these parameters. But I do not, gosh, I would not want to be a juror in a case on something like this in this day and age where you have to walk that fine line, but you also have the pressure, the weight of the world looking on you as this young white man killed a number of innocent black folks in, this horrific way at this restaurant. You have family members sitting there of the victims watching this trial day in and day out. It's a lot. And we had Emily on that note ask, could any of you doctors ever sit on a jury in a case like this? Have you ever been called for jury duty, John?
I have been, but as soon as I tell them
how does that voir dire go?
It's
yeah,
strike for cause. Strike for cause. And
they do the whole thing where the defense attorney and the DA have their whiteboard charts with little Post-its.
Yeah.
There's like a chair set up Post-its. And the minute I got called in for a domestic violence thing, and the minute I said I was a psychologist and an MFT, they both ripped it off and said, you can go.
Oh my gosh.
They did not want me there at all.
Yeah.
I got called in the last time I got called in, and I couldn't even believe that they put me through voir dire or anything, because when they called in my group of potential jurors, they sit you, at least in California, I'm sure most states, they sit you in the audience, and then the judge is like, okay, just right off the bat, does anyone have a relationship with anyone in this courtroom? Just let's get that out of the way. And the DA, I had been an investigating officer on a case with that DA before. It happened to be in the same jurisdiction where I was a police officer and where I live. And I'm like, yeah, we've worked together before. I've sat at that table with him before. And the judge was like, okay, mildly interesting. And then put me up there, and it was a pursuit where they had, the suspects had gotten into a shooting with the police officers. And here I'm answering every question I'm a former police officer. I'm a forensic psychologist. I've been in pursuits. I've been in shootings. It was to the last. I was like, what else do you want me to say? Okay, you can finally leave and go. But it's man, this was way more intense than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think, many of us would ever get on a criminal case.
It depends. It depends. I might. So I also do trial consultancy work. And so I might. It depends. It depends on what the attorney's narrative, what they're trying to spin in terms of.
I'm
the
sure
evidence.
some people would love to have you on there.
Yeah, that I might I might suggest having a psychologist on there, depending on how I think the demographics of the jury need to look. So I don't think that it totally, to our audience, I don't think it totally eliminates us, but I think there's a tendency to believe that we're going to be touchy-feely. Forensic psychologists are not touchy-feely, so if you want someone on the jury, it's probably us.
Right.
But we very rarely actually get to do it.
Yeah. I just want to read off the names of the victims in this case, since we talked about the perpetrator enough, but the 4 victims who lost their lives were Taurine Sanderlin, age 29, was an employee at the Waffle House. Joe Perez was the youngest victim at 20, and he had moved to Nashville from Texas just a few months prior to the shooting. D'Ebony Groves was from Gallatin and was a current senior at Belmont University, majoring in social work. She was 21. And then Aquila Da Silva, friends referred to him as a very passionate musician who was pursuing a career in musical engineering over at Middle Tennessee University. Scott and I just had to define what we thought justice was on another podcast that we were guests on. And, I think we're kind of speaking to a lot of that. You have the jury's job, of course, the expert witnesses, but then you have the ideas of, was justice served in this? And I think we can think of that in a lot of different ways, from the victims' surviving family members to justice of, the mental health system for this perpetrator. You're right, we are not touchy-feely. And we can go into those places of like, was he a victim of not getting the right services at some point as well? So hard questions. But John, thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely, like, I was so excited when I saw that you were doing that presentation. I was like, we are gonna find a spot to bring you in and talk with you. So where can people find you if they want to follow the work that you do?
I'm on all the socials. You follow me on Instagram at Dr. John Delatorre. On Twitter, Crime Psych Files, PSYC, Crime Psych Files. That's kind of where I am right now. And then you can catch me on TV. Law and Crime Trial Network and Court
Please, TV. Anytime you know that you're going to be airing, please let us know. We'll blast it on our social media. I've got a huge brain crush on you, dude. I'm telling you. Part of me doesn't want you to have a podcast because you're so good. It's competition. And the other part goes, no, I want to listen to you and learn what I didn't get in my training. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for coming on today.
I appreciate that. So our audience Monday, Court TV.
Sounds
good. Great.
Yeah, each of your spots when you're offering commentary are really, really enlightening. There can be people that get up there and say nothing, and that's not helpful. And I think, from the clips that I've watched, you've really added an extra layer there as well that I think is it's more cerebral, and I think that's why it fits nicely on, the people watching Court TV and watching these trials want to know something deeper. So it fits very nicely, and we're very happy that you gave us some of your time. So take care, and thank you so much. Everyone else, thank you for spending a Saturday with us. We know you could be doing a lot of different things in this evening and throughout your Saturdays, and you choose to like hang out with us and listen to us talk. So we appreciate you. We appreciate everyone listening to this who's a Patreon member on your other RSS feed, and everyone who ends up watching this on YouTube someday. So, all right, we'll see you next time on Behind the Couch. John, good night. Dr. Scott, good night.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.